Late last year, the FTB team released the highly anticipated StoneBlock 4, and I've already spent 100 Minecraft days turning this initial endless world of stone into what's quickly becoming one of my favorite bases I've ever built. But more importantly, I completed my goal of taking down the Ender Chicken. And I'm not done yet, because I'm giving myself another 100 Minecraft days to not just beat the pack and fully repair the world engine, but completely mastering it by completing Ascension. Now, maybe it goes without saying, but I definitely would recommend watching my first 100 days video before this one, because I'm skipping the recap so we can jump straight into the action of this video. That'll be filled with all kinds of crazy boss battles, tech glorp, and tons of automation. So I better get started. When we last left off, I had just completed Tier 3, so naturally the first thing I'll want to do is pay a visit to my new Tier 4 friends, which there are 3 of. The Echo of the Whimwright, who will get me started in Draconic Evolution, and the Echoes of the Twilight and Ancient, which appear to be roommates. This tier is all about taking on a bunch of different bosses, and luckily all of my work in my first 100 days has set me up really well to fly through this tier. But before tackling some of those challenges, completing Tier 3 has unlocked a couple critical key recipes that I'll definitely want to take advantage of. First, I can finally make the Reaction Chamber, which I'll absolutely want to get added to my AE2 machine wall so I can take advantage of a bunch of new recipes, like a much faster and easier way to make charged Certus, Fluix, and most importantly, a way to double Entro crystals by combining 32 Entro dust with Fluix to make a full stack of crystals. So that means I can make essentially infinite Entro by adding recipes both to craft Entro crystals and Entro dust, and then putting both in my MU requester so that it'll continue to keep both in stock at all times. One other thing to note about the Reaction Chamber is that it also adds some recipes to craft the just higher things fluids directly, like polymorph fluid and time fluid. Now, before taking on my first vault of Tier 4, there is a piece of gear that I want to make that is going to help me cheese things a little bit, and that's the Repair Talisman from Project E. But this thing isn't just great for the cheese, it'll also keep all of my different items topped full of durability, and can be stored nicely away in my belt slot. I'll also be making 2 more items that I'll need before taking on my first boss, both of which can easily be made in the world engine. First, a Deep Dark Catalyst, and then a Soul Cage. When I told you the pacing of this video would be a little quicker than my first StoneBlock 4 video, I was not joking, because it is only day 2 and I'm headed off to my first vault of Tier 4. This time I'm going back to an ancient city, and I'm looking for this massive portal in the middle. While vanilla players have been speculating, and maybe hoping, that this weird structure is actually a portal to a new dimension, this pack has a mod that makes that wish a reality, and that's where my Deep Dark Catalyst comes into play. When I use it on the reinforced deep slate blocks, it'll fill in a massive portal, which I'll go ahead and enter. These dungeons are made up of a whole bunch of different rooms that are randomly placed and laid out, and while I go around and explore and loot a bunch of cool puzzles and rooms, my main goal is to fill that second item that I made, the Soul Cage. Now, normally you fill the Soul Cage by taking out mobs, needing 40 total souls to fully charge it. But here's where my Repair Talisman helps me cheese things a little bit, because these souls are tracked with durability. So even just by standing here, you'll see that my Soul Cage starts to fill up. And once it's full, I can head up to the boss chamber using the white elevator right by the portal. By right-clicking my fully charged Soul Cage on this tombstone in the middle, I can go ahead and get my first boss fight of the video started, taking on the Maledictus. After a not so difficult boss fight, I was rewarded with the Cursium ingots I was looking for. And for the world engine upgrade I'm eyeing, 1 ingot is all I need, which means I'm out of here. But Cursium is just one of the materials I'll need to make my euphonium blocks. No, not the instrument. I'll also need some Enderium, which I ended off my previous video making craftable in the world engine. Skulk, which I can grab a bunch of at the ancient city, and Vibrant Alloy, which is a new pattern I can add in my alloy smelter and autocraft. Now that's all the items I need, but I'm still missing 2 fluids. 10 buckets of Fortron is easy since I got that set up with my deriver in my last video, but Liquid Darkness is going to need a little bit more Ender IO work. And as such, another Ender IO machine, this time the Vat, which I'll go ahead and make 2 of. Vats are interesting machines that take 2 augmenting items to convert 1 fluid into another. So for Liquid Darkness, I'll need some Obsidian Dust and Amethyst to convert Liquid Sunshine, which is why I made the second vat so I can make Liquid Sunshine with water, a glowing item, and a sunflower, or torch flower. Normally you can use Liquid Sunshine and Darkness and a Weather Obelisk to make it day or night, but but I don't think that's going to be very helpful here. After finishing converting 10 buckets of liquid darkness, I had everything I needed to put in the world engine and make my 8 blocks of euphonium, which I kind of realized isn't the 16 I needed. So I guess I'll do all that again. And now I have my 16 blocks of euphonium, which means some more money, an interesting reward, and to the ancient to complete my next stage, and go ahead and install my first world engine upgrade of tier 4. After taking down the Maledictus so easily, I'm feeling pretty confident right now. So to take advantage, I'm going to take on a full flight of bosses, this time from the Echo of the Twilight, who has a familiar set of tasks, taking on all of the different bosses from the Twilight Forest mod, which I've done many times, but there is something a little different this time. Instead of making the normal portal to head to the Twilight dimension, I'll need to head to a couple different mini vaults, each with their associated bosses. Each of these vaults are in the Twilight Ring, which is the 5th ring, and that means it's just a bit far to mine manually. So I'm buying the set of Twilight Ring Ender Shards from the Echo of Guidance, and heading to the east to find the Lich Vault. Once entering, I am very quickly met with some angry cow friends, who I could take out pretty easily. Before I can actually take on the Lich boss, I'll first have to solve a little sliding tile puzzle, using the computer monitor to move the new blocks around, which they may have made a little bit easy. But after solving, I'm heading into the center room to take on my newest Angie friend. To complete this fight, I'll first have to break his shields by deflecting the blue orbs back at the main guy. Then once the shields are broken, I can actually start doing some damage, or just one-shot him. After completing the fight, a chest will show up with some loot in the middle, and most importantly, a Twilight Lich trophy, which gives me my next locator compass for the Yeti. To find the Yeti, I'm heading south, and then into my next vault. Instead of a puzzle, this one starts with a little bit of parkour, avoiding these snowballs along the way. Once I make my way into the main central room, I'm not just spammed by some random mobs, but can go around the edges to find some gems and chests to loot, as well as some cute little guys from a spawner in each corner that gives me Arctic fur. And once I'm ready, I can head to the middle to take on the big guy, who definitely was more roar than bite, but that means more loot, including another trophy, which this time means 2 new compasses for the Hydra and the Snow Queen. Keeping with the cold theme, my next visit is to the Snow Queen, still heading south, but this time southeast instead of southwest. My puzzle this time is playing some pool, or curling? I'll need to slide this crab friend onto the red target block, which I think may have bugged out or something because I got 2 and they didn't really slide around. But regardless, I did it and moved on to take on the Snow Queen, which resulted in another one-shot and another trophy, plus a couple more bonus chests to loot. Okay, that's enough cold, let's head somewhere warmer. This time heading west to take on the Hydra. This one probably has the most fun puzzle in my opinion, which I can get to after one-shotting this mini-boss. Following the directions of the head to give you the pattern to open the door. I won't spoil the solution for this one, but once I completed the puzzle, I can open the door to head into this massive central room. Except this time there's no Hydra, but instead a couple more of those mini-bosses from a trial spawner that gives you the Hydra trophy once completed. I guess spawning a Hydra in was causing some problems. Before heading back home to take on my last Twilight boss, I of course did some looting, including some hidden chests on top of the Hydra lair, as well as a secret molten blaze fluid cow on a pedestal. After finishing up my looting, it was time for my final Twilight compass, for my final boss. So I'm heading north for the night. Here it's quiz time, testing my Minecraft knowledge. And hey, no cheating. After correctly answering all the questions, I could take on the knight, attacking this sentient knight to complete each stage, and being rewarded with my final trophy. And that completes my quest line from the Twilight Echo, resulting in another reward. This time a very helpful Watch of Flowing Time, which I'll put to great use later in this video, but also a year gas data model for all my Carmite needs. But more importantly, completing my next stage and installing my next world engine upgrade, placing each of the trophies. At this point, we are flying through tier 4, with only one quest line left for the Whimwright. And while the second half of this quest will be a little bit more involved, the first upgrade is another easy one, making some Draconic core components and some Crystal Matrix blocks. Luckily, with my Nether Star and Draconium chickens, I easily have the resources needed. So I'll just have to make a couple more patterns for Draconic components and can craft all the blocks I need to complete the first task and install my next upgrade. Now, eventually, I'll not only be using this upgrade for the world engine, but also for my power storage. But this is going to require a whole bunch of redstone and draconium. So to get ahead of that, now is a good time to go ahead and put some upgrades in my drawers so my chickens can keep producing in the background. While I don't have the largest energy core yet, even the minimum tier has a whopping 45.5 million RF of storage. These draconic energy cores are by far my favorite feature of draconic evolution. And by making an item called an energy pylon and placing some glass on top of it, I can turn these pylons into a little orb that allows me to import and export power to the energy core. Like always, I'll set up a new flux network for my generators, with a flux point onto my input orb, so anything that generates power feeds into the orb, and a flux plug on my output orb on my main network, so anything that uses power can pull from the orb, making a very nice centralized power storage setup. And of course, I then need to go to my power reactor and change my flux plug channel to now feed into my generator network. And these cool blue particles show that things are working correctly, even if that means the 45 billion RF storage instantly fills up. Now on to the second half of the quest. The first step is to make a Prometheum, which luckily I set myself up nicely to do with my Oritech room full of all kinds of AE2 automation, so nothing a little autocraft request can't solve, after a couple more Singularities build up. To keep myself occupied while those Singularities get made, I can work on the other side of my quest, requiring some water essence to make a gate pearl for all the Paralysis items I'll need. But that does mean I need to beat the gate, and luckily with my insane gear it was easy to take out a bunch of crabs, strays, mages, and to top it all off, a quick one-shot of a mini-boss, leaving me with all kinds of crazy intentional rewards that give me most of the items I'll need to make the Abyssal Sacrifice. Unfortunately, I'm still missing a couple of Vanilla Sea items, a Heart of the Sea, and a Nautilus Shell. And while I could go down another rabbit hole to get these either with Apotheosis or Occultism, I can instead just take advantage of the now over $2,300 I have, and buy one of each from the Echo of the Enchanter and the Echo of the Wayfinder, making it easy to craft the Sacrifice. Now, while all the other bosses I fought earlier in this video have been extremely easy, this next one will be a little more difficult. But first, I'll have to find the boss, using my Explorer's Compass to head towards the Water Orb. Entering the giant water orb, I am met with some familiar friends from Ocean Block 2, but more importantly, I realized that I forgot a very important gear upgrade, because fun fact, you can't breathe underwater. But that also reminds me I have an upgrade to my armor that I can do, and that's to finally upgrade my gear from red matter to gem armor. Most specifically, my helmet, which gives infinite water breathing. That does require some additional crafting using some of my most recent World Engine upgrades to make some Project E stones and amulets. The pants are a little special, and require the Watch of Flowing Time, which has to be bought from the Echo of the Ancient that we unlocked earlier. And the chest plate requires some cooking, which I'll take care of later. Unfortunately, the conversion to gem armor does wipe out my Apotheosis of fixing, but nothing a little reroll can't fix. And now with upgraded gear, I have no problem swimming around and taking out some of the many mobs that spawn around the outer edges of the structure. Of course, stopping along the way for a bit of looting, including some pretty nice rewards. What I'm really looking for is this altar in the middle, which I'll go ahead and give the Abyssal Sacrifice to spawn one of the coolest bosses yet, the Leviathan. After taking it down, I'm rewarded with the Tidal Claw and the Abyssal Egg, and of course some extra loot, including some replica blocks and some more chests. After my mission for the Abyssal Egg was complete, I now have enough Singularities to go ahead and start an autocraft request for 4 Prometheum. To complete my final upgrade of tier 4, I already have the main 2 items started, but I'll still need some other items, including some Empowered Void Crystals, which I already have automated, some Enderium and Sky Osmium, which I also have automated, and Resonance Engineering blocks, which takes some more work, mainly the advanced electronic components, which I could do a little extra work in IE to craft, or I could just be lazy and buy some from the shop. For the 2 fluids, Fortron is a familiar one, but there is a new fluid, Void Flame Fuel from Just Dire Things, which hopefully by now you've already seen my video on Just Dire Things, so you know how to make it. With all my crafting complete, it was time to put everything in the World Engine to craft my batch of 2 Resonant Void, which of course makes the Whimwright happy, and me happy with some more money and a nice reward. And last but certainly not least, it makes the World Engine happy with a new upgrade. This upgrade unlocks some critical recipes that I'll need to make use of, included for a Dragon Head and my personal favorite, the Time Crystal. And completing that final tier 4 upgrade means it's back to the Echo of Guidance for another stage complete. This time though, I'm not met with the location of some new echoes. Instead, I'm heading back to the Whimwright who provides a new task, crafting a Chronon Resonator, which has a whole lot of new pieces. And luckily one of those is something that I've been itching to get into, and that's time crystals. Unlike in the default Just Dire things, in this pack you can make time crystals 2 different ways. To start, I'll have to make 2 sets in the World Engine with my new upgrade and some Entro, Fluxite, Fortran, and Void Flame Fuel. With 8 time crystals, I can turn 4 of them into 4 buckets of time fluid by throwing them into some polymorphic fluid. And we'll use those to make the second way of generating time crystals, and that's with chickens. But before I can make what would be my first tier 9 chicken, I'll need some tier 9 chicken seeds. And that means it's time for a new mod, and of course, a new room. If you couldn't guess from the purple theme, the next mod I'll need to get into is Draconic Evolution, and I made this room to automate this mod's interesting and slightly tedious method of crafting. I mean fusion crafting. While this crafting is relatively simple at its surface, requiring a fusion crafting core, which I'll place in the middle of the room, as well as a bank of crafting injectors surrounding the middle, the difficult part is automation, especially with AE2. There are a couple different options here, but I'm choosing to stick with a more basic setup since I only really need a couple of recipes. The main idea is to use modular routers to disperse items, similar to what I did for the Empower setup from Actually Editions. An AE2 pattern provider outputs items into a chest, and then I use pipes to filter the middle item to the chest on the left, and the injector items to the chest on the right. Then those items feed into 2 modular routers, the one on the left with a sender module that goes into the Fusion Crafter, and the one on the right has a couple distributor modules that round robin distributes 1 item to each injector. And then the last step is to make a 3rd modular router that pulls the finished item and inserts it back into the pattern provider, which I'll put on blocking mode and lock so that it waits to receive the contents from a craft until sending the next batch so I don't end up with items in the wrong places. The Fusion Crafter also needs a redstone pulse to start crafting, so I'll replace my filler block with a redstone clock that will spam the crafting cord to continuously craft as needed. Now, while I'd love to test this setup with my first and definitely most important pattern to make Awakened Draconium, I'm missing one crucial item, and that's a dragon heart. Normally I get these from taking down an ender dragon, but in this pack, the ender chicken is a chicken, not a dragon. So I'll have to resort to this World Engine recipe, which is going to lead me down a whole bunch of new rabbit holes. The first one is some Apotheosis enchanting, which I'll need to make some infused Dragon's Breath. The Dragon's Breath itself I can make easily with an extractor capturing the bad breath from this dragon head, but to infuse it I'll need to get a very specific enchanting setup. Hopefully you've already seen my Apotheosis Mod Labs episode that explains Apotheosis enchanting and how to alter specific stats, but because this process is semi-painful, I'll give you a hint for the final enchanting layout I ended up with, which I'm sure is by far not the most efficient layout, containing 4 Draconium blocks, 6 sea shelves, 6 echoing deep shelves, and 1 echoing skulk shelf, allowing me to fuse all the Dragon's Breath I need. So that checks one more item off the list for the Dragon Heart, but I have one left, the Life Stone, which brings back a familiar 2 set of stones, the Body and Soul Stone. And I really am not feeling like doing some cooking, so I'm gonna do something a little bit more fun, and do some Gamba. Since for each Project E loot crate I open, I have a 7% chance to get each of the Body or Soul Stones, and a 3% chance to get the Life Stone straight up. So let's see how many crates it takes to get either the Body Stone or the Life Stone. Surely not that many. Well, 16 wasn't too bad, I guess, but mission accomplished. And that means I can craft my first Dragon Heart, and use all of my self-control not to instantly turn this into my first Awakened Draconium, because if I'm gonna want to make more Dragon Hearts, I really don't want to have to do that whole process again. But luckily, there's another mod that is perfect for allowing me to duplicate this heart, or should I say, replicate. Replication is a crazy cool mod that allows you to break items down into 8 different types of matter, and then basically 3D print items using that matter. Honestly, it's super powerful, and I really need to start taking better better advantage of it in my future playthroughs, especially when packs include an add-on mod that lets me craft an AE2 replication bridge that allows me to connect my AE2 system and have it auto-craft specific items using replication. To print an item, I'll need to save the recipe for it, which I can do in the identification chamber with a memory chip. Unfortunately, that eats my dragon heart, but when I put my memory chip in the chip storage and check the terminal, I'll now see that I can craft dragon hearts with a whole bunch of essence. And luckily in this pack, there is one item that gives a ton of every type of essence, and that's red matter, which means if I put a red matter in the disintegrator, it'll break it down into a bunch of essence and store it in the tanks that I placed earlier. To keep my matter tanks topped up, I'll use a stock export bus to export red matter directly, but I'll have it only export when there isn't one red matter already in the machine to avoid a bunch of excess overflow red matter. And thanks to my replication bridge, I can now see this matter building up in my AE2 network. And more importantly, a pattern for dragon hearts, which I can go ahead and craft, which I'll start to see printing in my wall of printers. And with a way to craft dragon hearts, that means I can finally test my fusion crafting setup to make my first awakened draconium block. Except I unfortunately forgot a crucial next step, and that's to upgrade my basic injectors to the wyvern tier. But hey, at least it looks like all the items went to the right spots. So after getting all of my injectors upgraded, which was a little bit painful, I could finally actually craft my first set of Awakened Draconium. And Awakened Draconium finally brings me back to what started this whole mess, making some tier 9 chicken souls at the cost of a bunch of nether star chickens. And 4 tier 8 souls I can craft together to make tier 9 chicken seeds. And the first tier 9 chicken is none other than the timey-wimey chicken. After moving my new friend into his forever home, that also officially leaves me with an infinite amount of time crystals, which I can also automate a recipe using the reaction chamber to keep me topped full of time fluid. And while there are many great uses for time crystals and fluid, none are quite as good as the time wand, which essentially does the same thing as my temporal pouch, except without the requirement for charging up with real time. Since I have just dire things on the mind, now that I finally have some dragon breath, it seems like a good time to upgrade my void shimmer goo to the max tier shadow pulse, which also means I can finally make the max tier resource eclipse ember with netherite. And this allows me to do a couple key upgrades, including an eclipse alloy hoe, which then I can make the max tier soil to upgrade my chicken seed production. I can also upgrade my polymorph wand from earlier to the advanced version, which is going to allow me to do some slightly crazy stuff. While the wand previously let me randomly convert an animal, the advanced version lets me save a mob type and turn any mob into that same type, which there is one mob that I am very interested in, and that's fluid cows. Now I can cycle mobs through all the different types of fluid cows so I can easily get specifically what I want. And oh, look at that! Shoalfire is just the one that I was looking for. So time for a little bonk, and time to add a new fluid cow to my collection for an infinite amount of it. And there are a couple of other extremely useful cows that I can use too, including pink slime, creosote oil, biofuel, ether gas, molten ender, essence, and strange matter. And eventually some other fluids that I'm probably forgetting. After catching up on a couple new fluids, I also decided it would be a good opportunity to spend a little time expanding my AE2 auto-crafting setup, which at this point had pretty much entirely filled up. But luckily, nothing a couple more extended pattern providers and molecular assemblers can't solve, leaving space for tons of new patterns, and even a couple new replication patterns. But now with my eyes starting to glaze over a little bit from a whole bunch of infrastructure work, I can finally see the fruits of my labor putting together some chronoton glass, wyvern cores, teleportation cores, a chronon battery, some of those time crystals from earlier, the return of Fortron, and some Shoalfire from my new cow friend. And of course, all of that gets combined in the world engine to make my key next item, the Chronon Resonator, completing the Whimrights task, which gives me a new special battery opening a portal to a very special location. Welcome to the Fractured Void, a super cool new extension to Spawn that is home to 3 new friends, the Echo of Radiance, Echo of Chaos, and finally, the Echo of Infinity, each paired with a new questline and a couple new tasks. Because I've already gotten a head start on the mod, the Echo of Chaos seems like a logical next step since I've already completed an injecting crafting setup, and automated a source of dragon hearts for Awakened Draconium. But one thing I haven't done is upgraded my crafting injectors to the Draconic tier, and luckily the world engine provides a much easier way to do this upgrade than what I had to do for the wyvern injectors. But of course, that first means making a whole bunch more Awakened Draconium, and a whole bunch of crafting in the world engine. And while crafting so many different things in parallel, I got a good reminder that after a lot of lobbying, the FTB team added a new upgrade slot in the world engine that I can fill in with some more wyvern cores to increase the energy capacity of the machine, allowing it to do more operations in parallel for a much faster throughput speed. But regardless, my Draconic injectors had finished and could be replaced in my fusion crafting setup. unlocking some new recipes, and more importantly, speeding up my infusion crafting. Because for the next World Engine upgrade, I'm gonna need an insane amount of awakened Draconium, 370 blocks of it to be exact, which even with my new injectors is gonna take a long time. So I better get a crafting request started. While waiting for that to finish up, I should probably get started on the other part of the upgrade, 786 blocks of Draconium. And while I do have a Draconium chicken working a way to get the ingots needed, let's get him in the gym to speed that up even further. And of course, a little more time on action, totally balanced by the way. So that means it didn't take long to have enough Draconium to get another massive crafting request started. With my crafting request completed, it was time to head back to the Echo of Chaos to complete his stage, but more importantly to get my very useful next World Engine upgrade installed. Now that is an energy orb. This big boy doesn't just look awesome, but also greatly increases my central power storage to an essentially infinite amount of RF. To put that into more context, at the rate I'm currently charging it, I wouldn't even get to 0.5% of its capacity by the end of this video. And while I won't need nearly the amount of power it would take to fill the ball to complete this video, I do still need to upgrade my power generation a little bit for some of my upcoming tasks. So time to add a couple more nitro reactors to my generator room, which means copy pasting a bunch of the same setup, with the only difference from before being that I can now use time fluid as my fluid coolant, which is the highest tier in this pack. And with all my new generators running at full speed, I'm now generating just under 1.2 million RF per tick, which still won't quite be enough for what I have in mind, but it's a good start. And I have something that will start using some of that power right away. And for that, we have some more Oritech to do. It's particle acceleration time, because I'll need some plutonium. Now for my FTB Skies 2 and ATM 10 TTS playthroughs, I have quickly learned that the modded Minecraft community is pretty split on particle acceleration. While it can be a little tedious, personally I think it's a pretty cool mechanism for crafting, and this pack adds a couple items that make this process even easier. So it's time to head to a new compact machine for a nice safe workshop. I already explained particle acceleration in my ATM 10 TTS 100 days video, so if you're looking for a more in-depth explanation, you can always head over there. But there is one key difference here, because this pack has the add-on mod Oritech things. And time to put in some more mega crafting requests for the components I'll need. The main setup of the particle accelerator remains the same, but there is one key difference. This accelerator in the middle removes the distance requirement as the particle increases at high speeds at the cost of additional power, which means for the plutonium setup, I'll need to get up to 2500 joules. Instead of needing a massive setup covering a huge area, I can instead make something a lot more compact. So this is all I need. The first step before trying an actual recipe is always to test your setup with some cheap resource to make sure it's working. For plutonium, since I need 2500 joules, that means I'll need a speed of 2500, which looks like my setup couldn't quite handle. So while I was hoping to wait to do this, I guess I should go ahead and get some upgrades for my magnet. Luckily, the Whimwright sells some upgrades in the shop to save me some crafting time. But now with my magnet heavily upgraded using a bunch of capacitor add-on extenders, I have no problem getting to 2500 meters per second, or well over it, which means I can go ahead and make my first plutonium dust. Now, there is no way I want to do all this particle acceleration crafting manually, so let's do some automation. I could go crazy with an AE2 pattern setup, but honestly, since I only have like 1 or 2 recipes I'll need to use this for, I'll only go semi-automatic. And Oritech Things adds a very useful item to make this process a lot easier, called the Particle Accelerator Speed Sensor. This thing is pretty simple in that it emits a redstone signal when a linked particle accelerator's particle reaches a certain speed, but that works really nicely when placed next to a dropper on the opposing particle accelerator, sending the secondary item in and causing the collision. Then I can output the resulting item into an output chest. Now all I have to do is put a bunch of secondary items in the dropper, set the speed based on the collision requirement, and then put a bunch of primary items in the initial particle accelerator. And boom, a whole bunch of explosions for a whole bunch of plutonium. Plutonium dust is just what I need to make my next important ingredient, plutonium pellets, which I'll do by using the most efficient recipe for duradium. And these pellets get broken down into smaller versions, which I'll need to make my next major machine, the neutron collector. I'll want a couple of these things, so to make my life easier, I'll make a couple patterns to do some crafting for me. And to start, 8 is the magic number I have in mind. And the home for these 8 collectors is none other than this very special high-tech room I made in the back. These collectors are really quite simple. They create neutron piles passively. The problem is each pile takes almost 6 minutes. So while 8 collectors means I do get 8 piles every 6 minutes, that's not going to be nearly enough for the mass amount that I'm going to need. Luckily, I have a plan to make them much quicker. And that includes my time wand, the Watch of Flowing Time from earlier, and a dark matter pedestal. When the Watch of Flowing Time is placed on a pedestal and activated, it'll accelerate all the blocks around it in an 8-block radius, which means all these collectors will start ripping speed. But that's not enough because I can still use my time wand to accelerate the collectors and stack the speed increase. And after just under a minute of time wand action, I have over 500 neutron piles and my first neutronium nugget and ingot. Now eventually I'll be able to make neutronium even faster with a new tier 9 friend, But unfortunately, I'll need one more world engine upgrade before I can make that bad boy. But while I let that Neutronium continue to pile up, there is another extremely time-consuming process that I've been dreading setting up. But I guess I have to get it started if I'm going to have any chance of completing this pack in just over 60 days. And you know what that means? It's new room time. Was a little bit of an understatement because this massive chamber took way longer to build than I expected, but not to fear because I'm about to fill all 3 of these spaces pretty quickly. And the new mod of choice to make that happen is none other than Mekanism, because unfortunately it is fizzle fuel time. And I've done this whole process countless times in series, so I won't cover it here. And instead, while I'm getting the whole chemical setup going, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit about the antimatter process because, oh man, does it feel overdone. I'm really hoping that 2026 is the year that modpack makers finally leave the endgame Mekanism stuff in the rearview mirror. Because while it's a really cool and fun setup the first time, it genuinely has been the exact same for at least the last 5 years. And pretty much every pack insists on it being a gate to complete, which makes doing all this stuff again and again a mega feels bad. But anyways, enough venting because I now have 256 millibuckets of fizzle fuel being generated every tick. One thing I will note that I'm doing slightly different than normal is that for all the base ingredients required, which in this case is uranium, fluorite, and sulfur, I have dedicated chickens generating away. And also in this pack, the Mekanism upgrade multiplier has been increased, so instead of the normal 8 upgrades, I can do up to 32 of each energy and speed upgrade, which for some machines like the oxidizers is extremely useful, avoiding me needing multiple machines like I normally would for this fast of a setup. Now, fizzle fuel is important, but it's only the first step to antimatter, and this next massive room will be home to my next item, a huge 15 by 15 by 18 fission reactor. And I can use the internal Mekanism reactor calculator in JEI to determine exactly how many blocks of each type I'll need to build one. And of course, a little aid to autocrafting to make it happen. And then it's time to get to a bunch of block placing. With my reactor completed, now I can start feeding in the fizzle fuel that I'm making, which is easy enough. But the harder part will be coolant. Normally I could do this extremely easily with integrated dynamics, but without that mod, I'll just use an extended I/O port with an infinite water drive similar to what I did for Singularities and Matter Balls. But even this won't be enough, and that's what my second massive room is for. Once again, using the JEI calculator and some aid to autocrafting to get just the right amount of blocks, this time I'm making a turbine, which will both handle the excess steam that'll eventually come from my reactor, turning it back into water for a nice closed loop system, but it will also greatly increase my power generation. So it's time for some more block placing. And now I have a functional turbine. So I guess let's test some things out and hope nothing blows up. Of course, starting with a very low fuel usage rate in the reactor before cranking things up. But I can already see that I'm getting the most valuable output, spent nuclear waste. And my steam is flowing into the turbine, spinning those rotors up, resulting in a growing amount of power, and the water is making its way back from the turbine vents into my reactor to keep the process going. And with everything looking like it's working, it's time to crank it up. Unfortunately, before I can start running this thing at full speed, I have a little bit more Mekanism to do. And that's to convert the spent nuclear waste into something a little bit more useful. And that comes just in time for an important day milestone. Officially halfway through this video, my next target is to achieve my final Mekanism goal of getting antimatter. I have just one machine left to make, and that's an SPS chamber. Those building blocks require a mix of both polonium and plutonium pellets, which come from processing this spent nuclear waste. Plutonium is made the same way as normal in an isotopic centrifuge, but polonium has a little wrinkle, mostly because there's no sun to use the normal solar neutron activator. So this pack adds a new multi-block to replace that called the neutron activator, and another quick Mekanism setup that I forgot for HTTP PvE. By using the quest to figure out all the special blocks I need, I can place down the activator and build the multi-block using the hologram that comes up when I click the structure pop-up in JEI. Then once assembled, I can now pump the spent nuclear waste in and give it some neutronium and some heat. Luckily this time not nearly as much power or heat as needed for the world engine. But with all that, I can go ahead and start making some polonium. And with 2 PRCs, I can use both of these new gases to make the pellets that I'm looking for. For the SPS chamber, I'll need 72 SPS casing, and that means I'll need 288 polonium pellets and another 72 plutonium pellets. So the rest of my day was spent waiting those pellets out, with potentially a little more help from the time wand. And finally, after so much work, I can craft my 72 SPS chamber blocks, 3 SPS ports, a supercritical laser, and a bunch of structural glass. And you may notice that I have run out of rooms to build more Mekanism machines, so I guess the only logical place to go is up. To avoid a bunch of ugly cables running in the air to input the polonium and export the antimatter from the chamber, I'm using some entangled blocks linked to a radioactive waste barrel for the polonium. And at the low cost of 400 million RF per tick, I'm making a whole bunch of antimatter. And once that SPS chamber builds up to 1,000 millibuckets, I'll officially be able to make my first antimatter pellet. But while that builds up, my brain is kind of exploding from an insane amount of Mekanism glorp. So I have to take a break and do literally anything else. And luckily, I have a very fun next task, and it involves a slightly different type of laser. Way back in my first video, I set up this compact machine with a little wither friend getting lasered for ether gas. And I think it's about time we add another friend to join him, except this time a chicken, or not just any chicken, an ender chicken. So first I'll get another little platform set up with a stasis chamber full of tier 2 add-ons to make sure the ender chicken stays frozen. This time the ender chicken can break any blocks that I place, even this tinted glass, which is unbreakable to the wither. So I have to be extra careful and make sure that this stasis chamber is always functioning. Unlike the wither, I can only spawn the ender chicken in any of the chicken arenas, so I'll need a way to teleport him directly from there to here. And that's where the dislocator from Draconic evolution comes in. I combine the dislocator to this position straight into the field of the stasis chamber by shift right clicking. Now back at the ender chicken's lair, you can notice that there actually is a hidden secret built in, and that's this dislocator receptacle, which is actually set up nicely to create a portal using the Draconic infused obsidian, which is right below where the ender chicken would spawn in. So by right clicking my bound dislocator on the receptacle, I'll open up a portal that leads straight to my compact machine and into the stasis chamber. So when I summon the ender chicken, before it can even fully spawn in, it'll teleport. And if I head back to my compact machine, we'll now see a tiny baby ender chicken frozen in time. Not quite so dangerous now, are you? Then just like the wither, I need to get a fluid laser base on top of the ender chicken. Although this time it is a little bit harder because the ender chicken's hitbox is a little bit strange. To make this lasering as quick as possible, I'm placing a bunch more drills, all fully upgraded. And the last step is to add a black laser lens to my laser drill and reveal the whole purpose for this setup, generating molten chaos. All of this has been building up to me making some chaos shards, and unlike in most packs where I'd have to go take on the chaos dragon, instead by laser drilling this little chicken friend, I could take molten chaos and solidify it into tiny chaos fragments. While this whole process is relatively quick, my eventual goal is to replace the chicken with another chicken, the chaos chicken, needing 4 large chaos fragments to craft, but also an additional 2 small chaos fragments to craft the awakened draconium chicken first. And I'll actually want 2 of those so I can automate awakened draconium as well. So time for the time wand to put in some work. While waiting for those large fragments, I can at least start by making those first 2 awakened draconium chickens with some clicky crafting. One of them gets to hit the gym and start cranking out awakened draconium, which replaces my clicky recipe for the blocks. And the other one gets to wait it out a little bit longer since I'm now just 2 large shards away from getting them upgraded. But even if I did have the rest of the shards, I still would need the next world engine upgrade to get my draconic injectors upgraded to the chaotic tier for the recipe. So now I guess it's time to tie all of this together. My SPS chamber has been hard at work with now just under 2 buckets of antimatter. When put into a chemical crystallizer, it'll create probably my most important ingredient yet, antimatter pellets. Eventually my goal will be to make an antimatter chicken with 10 buckets of antimatter. But for now, the first piece I need to use for my next world engine upgrade by making a black hole, and that means more particle acceleration. I could use the same setup from previously, but making this black hole requires a much higher collision speed. So I'll go ahead and update my sensor trigger speed to the correct number, and of course want to test this setup with some cheap cobblestone to make sure that it works and avoid losing extremely valuable chaos shards or antimatter. And looks like it worked, so now time to do it again, but for real this time. And boom, I successfully made a black hole, which is totally safe to hold in my hands, I think. Honestly, at this point, the black hole was probably the most difficult item I had remaining, so it feels real good to have it done. But to actually turn it into my world engine upgrade, I'll have to use it to craft the void container, allowing me to head back to the fractured void, complete the stage of the radiance, and install one of my last world engine upgrades. This upgrade unlocks a ton of important recipes, not just including the chaotic injectors I need for that chaos chicken, but also a ton of important items I'll need for my very last echo, the Echo of Infinity, who gives me my final task, crafting an infinity block and 2 reactor neutron reflectors. Which, hey, those neutron reflectors are easy, but that infinity block, that's a different story. But before I get into the craziness that is about to be infinity ingots, I decided to first finish up a couple easier tasks, like upgrading those Draconic injectors to the chaos tier in the world engine, and then using those to turn my second awakened draconium chicken into a chaos chicken. Now, what is one of the most rare resources of modern Minecraft, I can make stacks of with ease thanks to my new chicken friend. And why stop there when I have another chicken I can make for another extremely important resource, and that's to replace my Neutronium collectors with a new Neutronium chicken, using a new recipe in the world engine. To do that, I'll need 4 Neutronium blocks, which means some more time-wand action. But another thing I'll need is a heavy core, and there's no trial chambers here, but what I can do is some more particle acceleration, exploding some reinforced deep slate with some duranium dust. And then once my Neutronium finished up, I can go ahead and make my first Neutronium chicken, producing insane amounts extremely quickly. And actually, the first thing I'm using this Neutronium for is making another Neutronium chicken, who eventually will get turned into an Antimatter chicken. But unfortunately, I don't quite have enough Antimatter to make that happen yet. And while I do have a little backlog of polonium, even if I quickly remove the limit of my flux plug, I still don't quite have the 10 Antimatter I'm looking for. So I guess I should be productive and use this time to start working on something else. Infinity ingots are pretty much the endgame resource that uses a whole bunch of the items I've been slowly building infrastructure for throughout this playthrough, including things like Fortron and Time Fluid, which I already have fully automated, Crystal Matrix, Enderium, Fortron Infused, and Neutronium ingots, all of which I have AE2 automated recipes for, Stable Antimatter, which is made with my particle collision setup, but does need Antimatter, which will eventually be automated with that Antimatter chicken. But the last item, the Infinity Catalyst, is the difficult one that I need to go ahead and get started on. It's another world engine recipe with a lot of carryover items from the Infinity Ingot, but the 2 I have my eyes on are the Endus Pearl and the Infinity Singularity. Luckily, that Singularity is not quite as crazy as Project Nope Zone. If you know, you know. But it will require me to fully automate 6 different resources: Duranium, Fortron Infused Ingot, Enderium, Energite, Infused Ender Pearls, and Uraninite. And while I could brute force these singularities, since each only requires between 50 and 100 of the associated item, to make my life easier, I'm going to go ahead and fully automate all 6 singularities directly, and I need a room to do it. Now, the goal of this room is simple: passively automate each of these 6 resources, and using a new machine called the Neutronium Compressor, which I'll need a new pattern to automate in the world engine, and then spend some time waiting for this massive recipe to finish crafting. Then inputting 50 to 100 of each item into these Neutronium compressors, with a slightly ugly pipe setup thanks to Neutronium compressors only accepting items from the top, I can create its associated singularity. Now I just have to actually automate it. To give myself easy access to my AE2 system, I'm first setting up a wireless access point that connects to an extended ME interface. Here I can pick specific items, and the interface will keep the blocks stocked with those items sourced directly from my storage. I'm also iron downgrading each of these intermediate drawers because I really don't need a lot of buffer storage, since everything should get converted directly to a singularity. 2 of these bottom alloys are still semi-easy, but do require an intermediate step in an Ender IO alloy smelter, combining nickel and flexite for energite, and platinum and netherite for duranium. I will need some capacitors to get these alloy smelters running, and why make some normal ones when the machinist offers a way to gamble for them? I'll buy a couple, looking for the 2 with the highest base modifiers, with anything over 3 being better than the top tier craftable capacitor. For Enderium, while it is an alloy, it's not made in an alloy smelter, but instead the world engine. But actually there's a custom machine added called the Enderic Infuser that I can use to make it in an ingot form much quicker. So I'll go ahead and add patterns for all the recipes it unlocks, including Fortron Infused Ingot, Enderium, and Fortron Infused Blocks. But this machine is a little special because it doesn't use power like normal machines, but instead both heat and and rotation from create. But of course, everything always leads back to power, because rotation I'll make with 2 motors at max speed and heat with a resistive heater. Now to get endgame actually turned into a singularity, I'll add the ingot to my ME interface. And to keep that stocked up, I can add another recipe to my ME requester so that it will always keep 256 ingots in stock, but make them in bulk requests of 2048. And man, is this ender infuser fast. Which is great because one of the other items I can make, Fortron infused ingot, is on my list. So I'll do the same thing with my ME interface and ME requester to finish up automation of 2 more singularities. Now just 1 item left. While I could craft the infused ender pearls with ender pearls and dimensional shards, there is another easier way, and that's because the pearls have replication values. So that means I can just add it to my replicator memory chip, set up a dedicated replicator on infinite print mode, make it a little faster with the replicator enclosure, and after a switch to XNet because pipes were being dumb and annoying, I now have fully automated items actually going to the right places and some quickly filling up drawers of singularities. And with all 6 singularities automated, all that remains is to make a pattern for the infinity singularity, drop it in the world engine, and craft away. And just like that, I have my first infinity singularity. But as if that wasn't cause for celebration enough, my SPS chamber has been hard at work now with over 10 antimatter ready to go. 2 of these I'll immediately use to make an antiprotonic nucleosynthesizer, which is a pretty interesting machine that uses antimatter to convert all kinds of items to more interesting items. But of course, my plan is to turn this already interesting Neutronium chicken into my most expensive and important friend yet, the Antimatter chicken, who once trained up makes stacks of antimatter at a time. Sorry SPS chamber, you just got replaced. On this nice day with so much antimatter coming in, I should probably do something with it. And that stable antimatter I mentioned earlier is one of the things left on my list. So with both Neutronium and antimatter being automated with chickens, I can make a whole bunch of it by adjusting the speed of my particle collision setup and letting it run. And with each collision resulting in a whole stack of stable antimatter, I very quickly have a whole bunch of it. And believe it or not, that is the last item I need to beat this pack, because now I have all the items and I'm just a couple patterns away from my biggest crafting recipe yet, with my final goal being for an infinity block, needing an infinity ingot, infinity catalyst, and an endless pearl, all of which pretty much is done in the world engine. And now I can put in a single crafting request and see the small list of just a couple items needed for my final world engine upgrade, a couple of the singularities, which I can help along with the time wand and the watch of flowing time. And with my singularities finally finished, that leaves just 1 item left. Blaze Gold, which somehow I never set up an automatic JDT crafter, but never to fear because I can easily make some again with the help of the time wand. And now it's time for the moment of truth, putting in a crafting request for 1 infinity block. And now I wait. Just like that, I have my most important item yet, the infinity block, which means after 172 Minecraft days, I can complete my final task for the Echoes, officially completing all 5 stages, giving me some insane rewards, including money and every single possible gift of stone, which is a lot of items. But more importantly, this means it's time to install my final world engine upgrade. And there it is, all 20 world engine upgrades and every possible recipe unlocked. And one last trip to the Echo of Guidance, and the quest book confirms that I have officially beaten StoneBlock 4. But wait a minute, if I've beaten the game, then why do I still have 28 days left and still a quarter of the video to go? Well, that's because my goal this whole time hasn't just been to beat StoneBlock 4, but to master it. And going back in the quest book, you can see that there's a new tier 6 called Ascension. Here I have the ability to make all kinds of creative items, basically taking everything I've done so far and cranking it up to the next notch, all leading to my actual final goal of making the creative Worldshaper. And the time is quickly trickling down, so I better get started. Ascension is broken down into 3 parts, with the first being gated by making a full set of infinity armor and the Sword of the Cosmos, which does a measly infinite attack damage. Each piece of gear requires 16 infinity ingots, totaling up to 80, which I'm missing a whole lot of resources for. Some of these items are an easy fix, like endstone, diamond, and neutronium, all of which I have chickens for and just need a little more time in the gym and some time wand action. And for blaze gold, to avoid even more time wand craziness, I'm just adding a new recipe to my replication setup, allowing me to use matter to easily craft thousands at a time. And the last piece I'm missing is a whole bunch of singularities, which feels a little familiar. So first, I definitely need to remove those iron downgrades on these singularity drawers, since I'm gonna need a whole lot more than 64. And while some of my singularities are climbing pretty quick, it's pretty obvious that I have 3 stragglers, but nothing a little repetition can't fix. With some more replication chambers for the infused pearls, and some more alloy smelters for duradium. But Energite, I have a slightly different and more efficient plan, and that's because I can make Energite in its block form instead of the ingot form with power. And with a slight reconfiguration of my pattern provider to now feed into multiple energizing orbs, and using the power wrench in linking mode to dedicate a bunch of nitro energizing rods to its associated orb, I can now crank out Energite ingots much quicker than I could with a bunch of alloy smelters. Now, even with my speedy new setup, I still have some waiting to do until my singularities finish up. So I'm gonna use that time to do a little infrastructure upgrade that honestly I'm shocked I haven't already done. And that's to my AE2 setup. Extended AE2 adds 2 very important crafting upgrades. They're gonna be extremely important for some of these larger recipes. First is the assembler matrix, which will replace this monstrosity of a molecular assembler setup. And the quest book gives me some nice quests that make it so I don't have to do a bunch of math, and can make the max size directly, and even includes some nice quest rewards to help get me there faster. So that means making 68 matrix frames, 150 assembler matrix glass, 30 pattern cores, 90 crafting cores, and 5 speed cores. Then up top, it's time to build a fun little multi-block, with the frames and walls on the outside, and the cores, you guessed it, in the middle. Then once connected, this beauty lights up, and inside you'll see the basically endless amount of storage for patterns. And each of those 90 crafting cores counts as a molecular assembler that can craft in parallel at max speed thanks to those 5 speed cores. So now all I have to do is remove my old setup and move all these patterns to the new assembler. Now while that crafter is much faster, I still am not taking full advantage of it thanks to my dinky little CPUs. So that's where my next upgrade comes into place, making a quantum computer. And it's a good thing I automated singularities so far back, because this 7x7x7 multi-block is going to use a whole lot of them, starting with a quantum core, which is definitely the most ridiculous recipe of them all. Thank goodness for the circuit fabricator. Then I'll also need 218 structural glass, 121 computer accelerators for insane amounts of co-processing, a 256M computer storage, a multi-threader, and a data entangler. And while waiting for that last item to finish up crafting, I can go ahead and build the quantum computer, basically the same way as the matrix assembler. And again, once connected, this thing will light up with a real cool texture. And this thing really puts my previous CPUs to shame, with 3,900 processors and over 2 billion crafting storage, all of which can be dynamically allocated with as many requests as needed. And that means all of my remaining crafting recipes are going to be completed way faster. Obviously still limited by some machine operations, but with essentially infinite threads to do things in parallel and almost instant crafting. Unfortunately, through all that, I still don't quite have enough ingredients to make my 80 infinity ingots, but I'm definitely now a lot closer with just 4 missing items: enderium, duradium, infused pearl, and energite singularities. While I can help this process along a little bit more with my time wand, specifically for fluxite, I can also use this time to make the rest of the ingredients I need for each of the infinity items to go along with those ingots, including a full set of red matter armor and a sword, 11 more infinity catalysts, 82 neutronium, 52 crystal matrix ingots, and the most interesting of the list, 10 buckets of carmite solution, which needs some superheated mixing of some carmite. And if you remember way back to the beginning of this video, one of the models we got was for the Urgas from the Twilight mod, which means it's time to do some mob simulating, surprisingly for the first time in this series. But of course, the time mod makes this extremely quick, allowing me to turn Urgas predictions directly into carmite. And to mix that, I'll need a little mini create setup. And to make superheating nice and easy, I can head back to Cal City and grab a couple buckets of biofuel, because if I feed a blaze burner with a straw with the biofuel, it'll turn them nice and blue and make it easy to melt down the 10 buckets of carmite solution I need. And the good news is that is everything I need to make infinity armor other than the ingots. The bad news, I'm still waiting on some energite singularities. So back to some time wand and some temporal pouch action. After a little bit of annoying back and forth, I finally got the magical 640 number I was looking for, and could start my crafting request for all 80 infinity ingots, which while is much faster than before, still has a large requirement on some linear world engine crafting. And thank goodness for those Draconic upgrades, because I unironically had to leave my world running overnight for my Twitch playthrough this pack. But Luckily, these upgrades allow a lot more recipes to run in parallel, and I can make it even faster with a couple new recipes with my clicky crafting for chaotic cores. Because chaotic cores increase the world engine capacity even more, allowing all 16 cores to run these extremely power-hungry recipes all at the same time. Zooming through the auto crafting needed. And finally, my 80 ingots finished crafting, which low-key I was very stressed about getting done this quick when planning. But regardless, this means I can craft my full set of Infinity Gear, realizing I miscounted Infinity ingots and made 6 extra. Replacing my gem armor and red matter sword, now doing just a little bit of damage to this test dummy. But more importantly, completing my first task of Ascension and unlocking the ability to make my first set of creative items. And I guess I'll give an early warning that this is gonna get a little checklisty, because all the creative items are made slightly different than pretty much everything else we've done so far, and that they're all repeatable quest rewards based on a bunch of specific submitted items. Before I move on to the next tier of Ascension, I'll need to make all 9 main creative items, and I'm starting with the most useful first, the creative memory chip, with a relatively easy recipe requiring a memory chip, a bunch of new singularities, and 2048 replica ingot. Replica ingot I already have set up with my replication setup, so I can go ahead and get those crafting while I work on the rest of the items. While I have my nice dedicated singularity setup for infinity ingots, I'm gonna need a lot more different types for many of these creative items. So I'm using this opportunity to go ahead and get an A2 automation setup for the rest of the possible singularity types that I don't already have automated, making it extremely easy to craft the copper, iron, gold, redstone, and red matter singularities that I need. And with my 2000 replica ingot finished and a memory chip being an easy craft, it's time to make my first creative item. And here's where we see our next thing that's different about the creative items, using the task screen, which I have to select the quest that I'm trying to complete and then input the items and eventually fluids directly into the screen. And once I do that for all the items, I'm rewarded with my creative memory chip. And the reason that this chip is so important is because when I put it in my replication chip storage, it automatically learns every single item that has a matter value, meaning it's now craftable with matter with my AE2 system. That's a lot of items I can craft. Next up is some Rs, which I really haven't touched a whole lot in this playthrough, but for my next creative item, I'll need 100 of all the possible essences and source gem blocks. So I better get that started, automating not just source gems, but all of the 8 different essences, each with 3 different unique identifier items. And then to quickly get the 100 I need, a little watch of flowing time action and some time wand. And back to the task screen, with some more submitting, resulting in a creative source jar, which pairs extremely nicely with my world engine if I have any later recipes that require source. Next up is the Ender Dragon data model, which is an extremely easy one since I already have a bunch of dragon eggs and some leftover infused dragon breath, and thanks to my creative memory chip, I can now craft the remaining 4 dragon heads with some matter. And while this model does give me some access to a couple items that I can make with the Ender Dragon predictions, I pretty much have all this stuff automated already, or I don't need it. So unfortunately, this model will pretty much go unused, as will pretty much all the rest of the creative items in tier 1, which does remove some of the feeling of achievement I was hoping for. But anyways, while I was venting, I went ahead and crafted all the items needed for the creative chronometer, giving me infinite teleporting power, which I basically kind of already had. The Infinity Power card is another easy one, requiring some Fortron singularities, which I definitely have a lot of, a Coercion Deriver, a blank card, and a couple stacks of Focus Matrix. But there are actually a couple landmines in this recipe that require some additional work. First, I'll need some hemp fiber, which I can farm pretty quickly by temporarily replacing some chicken seeds in one of my garden cloches. That fiber is what I need to make some tough fabric, allowing me to craft the stack of insulated MV coil I need. But my last task, the ultimate induction cell, is the hardest yet. Not just needing a bunch of recursive patterns to craft, but even with those patterns, I'm still missing a key resource, and that's lithium. And that means the return to some Mekanism. Lithium is a 2-step process requiring 2 thermal evaporation chambers. First, they both need heat, which I'll provide with some resistive heaters. Then in the left chamber, I'll input water, which converts it to brine, and then that brine flows straight into my right chamber, making liquid lithium. And then to get the actual dust I need, I'll pump that liquid lithium into a rotary condensator to make it into normal lithium, and then into a chemical crystallizer to make the dust. And with the dust acquired, crafting an ultimate induction cell was an easy one, and another creative item complete. The next creative item won't be nearly as helpful in this playthrough as it was in my Twitch world, because it's for chance cubes. 3 of the 4 items can't be crafted and have to be bought directly from the store, which luckily I've been banking money, so that's easy enough. Buying 10 normal cubes from the quartermaster, 5 isos from the catalyst, and 5 giants from the fabricator. But the last item is the Charm of Luck, which I could do some brewing, or I could just buy some directly from the enchanter, and then craft 3 of them to turn them into a charm. And another item checked off the list. Now, the good news is I only have 3 items left in tier 1, but all 3 are a little bit more involved. First, it's back to some create with the creative motor. The electric motor and redstone singularities are easy enough, but these precision mechanisms are a bit of a pain. Luckily, this recipe isn't special to the pack, so I can use pretty much any precision mechanism setup. And special shout out to Triobion, hopefully I've said that right, for this really cool and super compact design that is much cleaner than what I usually use, and also much faster, especially once I crank up that motor. And in no time, I had the 256 I needed, which I could submit to claim my creative motor, which I'll give you a sneak peek. This actually will be used for a very important setup by the end of this video. My second to last item takes me back to Mekanism with the creative toggleable laser. At its surface, it's an easy one, requiring an ultimate laser, which is easily made with replication, an ultimate energy cube, also made with replication but does need to be topped full of power, a bunch of refined obsidian, which I automated long ago, and a bunch of steel mechanical components, once again made with replication. But my last item is where there's a little bit of work, and that's Ignitium Ingot, which you may remember back in my first video that I got some of this from a certain boss back in tier 3. But with no other way to make it, that actually means I'm heading back to the Infernal Vault to battle the Ignis once again. But of course, with my new Infinity gear, I don't think this is going to be much of a challenge. One thing I definitely want to do this time though is get a data model, and make sure it's equipped in my Deep Learner, because unlike most mobs, the Ignis only needs 1 kill to get to the basic tier, allowing me to simulate right away and get the rest of my Ignitium with the resulting predictions, and completing my last task to claim the creative toggleable laser. And last but certainly not least is the creative goo. The stabilizer is an easy craft, and the paradox mixer almost is. It has 1 extra step for those 4 buckets of portal fluid. Portal fluid is a 2-step process, first starting by making some unstable portal fluid, which I already have a recipe set up in my reaction chamber for. And the second step is to convert that fluid with some goo, but that can't be done here, and instead has to be done in the end, or in this pack, the end ring, where I can easily convert and then grab my 4 buckets of time fluid used to make that paradox mixer. And the last piece I need is a stack of echoing budding time blocks, which is just straight up crafting a bunch of time crystals I already have, some echo shards which I can replicate, and some polymorphic catalyst. And that gives me my final tier 1 item, the creative goo, which replaces my existing goo, and after being toggled with the wrench allows me to instantly convert any JDT item without the need for any fuel items, which is pretty nice, even though I don't really think I'm ever going to use it. But more importantly, that officially completes tier 1 of Ascension. And for tier 2, I have just 2 items, but first, a choice: a creative controller for RS or an energy cell for AE2. And to be honest, it's not much of a choice given my massive AE2 room. And ironically, this is one of the easiest items yet, with another 16 Fortron infused singularities, 2 stacks of ultimate control circuits, 4 stacks of energy processors, a super dense energy cell, and then a whole bunch of Certus, which I have no problem submitting and claiming my creative energy cell, which I'll happily connect to my AE2 network, giving it infinite power. Although I guess I wasn't really having much of a problem keeping it powered anyways. The second item of tier 2 is an extremely powerful one, but unfortunately probably won't get taken advantage of, and it's the creative spellbook from Ars. I can quickly make the Amethyst Singularity, but that's about the only thing I'll be able to make quickly, because both the Archmage Spellbook and the Mark of Mastery require a Wilden tribute, and to spawn in the Wilden, I'll need a couple items from the different Ars mobs, which I could spawn in with one of the Ars rituals, or I can actually head back to the Arcane Grove way back from the beginning of my playthrough, and farm a bunch of the wings, spikes, and horns from the spawners littered around, boosting the drop rates with some Echo Shards until I get just about a stack of each. And after completing my mission and heading back to the base, I noticed something slightly stress-inducing. It is day 190, meaning I just have 10 Minecraft days left to complete some pretty major tasks. And while I've been flying through some of these tier 1 items, they are only going to get harder from here, so I guess I should keep moving. Normally we would need a bunch of these mob drops to craft the Tablet of Summon Wilden, but of course replication helps save me a couple resources with matter. Then to actually summon the Wilden Chimera to get the tablet I'm looking for, I have to use the Summon Tablet on a Ritual Brazier, and throw one of each of the Wilden drops in to spawn the boss, who I guess has a side job as a quarry, but either way I immediately destroyed him thanks to my Infinity gear, dropping the Wilden tablet I need, and actually dropping 2, which is really interesting. But unfortunately there is no data model or replication here, so I'll have to do this process a bunch more times to get the 21 total Wilden tribute that I need. And after watching back the replay a little bit, I think the reason I was getting 2 tribute per boss is because the Infinity Sword is doing so much damage that the first hit technically one-shots the boss, dropping 1 set, but because the Chimera has multiple stages, it keeps it alive, and then when I hit it again, that gets through the second stage, dropping another set of loot. And in no time time, I had the 21 tablets I need. One gets used to craft the Archmage Spellbook, and the other 20 go to the 20 sets of Mark of Mastery, along with 20 sets of each of the Essence that I already automated earlier. And then it's to the Enchanting Apparatus to get this crafting started. But of course, to avoid one of the more annoying crafting processes, I can use some hoppers to keep the pedestals topped up, and the time wand to speed through the entire process, making it easy to make and submit the 100 marks that I needed. Unlocking the Creative Spellbook, which this thing is pretty cool, automatically unlocking every single spell glyph and providing a whole bunch of configuration for creating extremely powerful spells. Ours is another one of those mods that is honestly super underutilized, yet extremely powerful both for damage or even utilities. Let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in a full Mod Labs video on ours, and it may be something I consider adding to my growing list of mods to cover. But better than the ability to create spells, the Creative Spellbook also completes tier 2, and moves me on to the third and final tier of Ascension, starting with the Creative Energy Cell. There is some low-hanging fruit here, including the Ultimate Induction Provider, which uses the lithium that I made earlier, an Ultimate Energy Cube that once again needs to be fully charged, and 16 Energite Singularities. But this is where things are going to start taking a bit of a step up, including 256 Redstone Singularities, which I'll definitely want to get that crafting started, 16 Chaotic Cores, which I have mostly automated, but does take a little bit of time, and unfortunately does require some manual intervention since my setup gets a little stuck with items that require a shared item that's both in the injector and in the core. But after way too long, I finally had my 16 Chaotic Cores. Unfortunately though, we're not done yet, because on top of needing 16 Chaotic Cores, I also need 16 Chaotic Capacitors, requiring another 16 Chaotic Cores and a ton of Draconium cores. And even worse, because the capacitors have some scuffed MBT data like the injectors, it makes it really difficult to automate with AE2. So I pretty much have to make all the base ingredients manually, meaning lots of waiting for the Wyvern capacitors, and then waiting for the Draconic cores needed for upgrading the 16 Draconic capacitors. Then waiting basically the rest of the day for 16 more Chaotic cores. And finally using those cores to upgrade my Chaotic capacitors. And finally, I had my 16 Chaotic Capacitors. I won't lie, I knew going into this that these were going to take a super long time, but I may have underestimated just a little bit, because now I only have 3 days left. Luckily, all that crafting gave me all the items I needed to claim my Creative Energy Cube, not just giving me infinite power, which makes my Draconic Energy Ball pretty happy, but more importantly means that I now have just one item remaining, making the Creative Worldshaper. Starting with making 10 of pretty much every single singularity, shout out to my Quantum Crafter making this super easy. Unfortunately, getting them all submitted is a little more time consuming. My bulk of AE2 singularities makes the 4 stacks of shattered singularities nice and easily, even if it takes a couple minutes to craft. And remember back when I told you that this creative motor from Create would be extremely important? Well, that's because my next 2 items require some mechanical crafting, which requires a bunch of crafters oriented based on the specific recipe, all flowing into whatever final output chest you want. First up is the Wand of Symmetry, and oh boy, look at those items go with my creative motor at max speed. And second is the Potato Cannon, which requires a slight reconfiguration, but still crafts just as quickly. The Potato Cannon is actually so fun. By charging up and then wearing a pressurized back tank, you can actually fire potatoes out of it. And while it doesn't do an insane amount of damage, it does make a really satisfying noise and has pretty nice range. But I guess with time running out, I'll have to say goodbye to my new toy and go ahead and submit it in the Wand of Symmetry to my task screen. And with just 1 day remaining, I only have 1 item left to make. And it's fitting that to do it, I'm heading back to the World Engine. And nothing left to do but drop all my items in, making the Extendo Grip, submit it to the task screen, and complete my final quest. Getting $100,000, the Creative Worldshaper, and more importantly, completing Ascension and thus mastering StoneBlock 4. And with the rest of my day, there was nothing I'd rather do than admire all that I had built. And there it is, day 200. What an absolutely insane journey. And thank you guys so much for watching this video, especially if you made it all the way through all 200 days. Definitely make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because I have another 100 days video in the works for a new pack coming out in the next couple weeks. That's gonna be a little bit of a different vibe, but extremely fun. And I'll also have some more Mod Labs videos coming soon. And of course, I'd really appreciate you guys leaving a like, and more importantly, any comments on your favorite parts of this video, the pack, or even any feedback for me to consider while I'm working on my next projects. From starting with nothing but a bunch of stone, to taking out the Ender Chicken, fixing the world engine, and now 100% completing Ascension, this journey has been packed full of everything from building, taking on some crazy bosses, and doing a whole lot of glorp. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.